everyone, Kelly here, and today I want to share with you the books that I read in the last half of December. So I did do a mid-month December wrap-up, and I'll link that down below, but these are the books that I read in the second half of December. But before I start talking about the books, I kind of want to say a little bit about why this video is coming out halfway through January so late compared to when I was planning on putting it out. But if you'd rather skip right to the reviews, I always put the timestamps of everything I review down in the description box so you can skip around. But if you want to know what's been going on with me, you can listen. So we're like halfway through January, and January has just been a bit of a mess. I had all these high hopes for January. You know, we had taken a lot of time off from homeschool in December to do like Christmassy kind of stuff and fun things. And I had this plan to start off on January 4th with, you know, we were going to be studying ancient Greece and the oceans, and had all these big like elaborate crafts and experiments and all these things I had planned. I also had all these plans for like, for my channel. I had, you know, wanted to do all my end of year stuff in January. That was my plan at the beginning of January, was to film all my like best of and disappointing and all those things. And then on January 3rd, I was starting to get like a scratchy throat. So I thought maybe I'll just take a COVID test, and it turns out I had COVID. And then like a few days later, my older daughter started having symptoms, and then a little bit later, my younger daughter, and now my husband's sick. So our whole January has just been us being sick. And, you know, luckily, like all of us have been able to be at home, so we haven't had any like emergencies or anything like that. But yeah, this is the first day in like the last like 2 weeks basically that I haven't felt the need to take a nap. And so I'm going to see if I can make it through this whole video without like losing my voice, because that's another thing I've been having a lot of. So we haven't been doing much school. Like we didn't do any school that first week of January because I was like really feeling sick the first few days. Then my daughter was just exhausted and she lost her voice for a few days and I lost my voice. So we didn't know school that first week of January, and I basically didn't read anything. We didn't do like pretty much anything. We were basically just resting and, you know, not feeling good. And then this week we've slowly been getting back into school, but like all those elaborate things I had planned, I just didn't have the energy for a lot of those. So we've kind of like been stepping into ancient Greece and reading myths and reading the Tales of the Odyssey, which my daughter is really loving. So we have doing some school, but definitely not to the full extent that we normally would. And I'm finally starting to feel a little better, but I don't know if you can hear my voice. I still have a lot of like congestion and stuff going on. But like I said, it's the first day I haven't felt the need to nap in 2 weeks. So I'm hoping that means I'm on the upward swing of getting some energy back. So I thought I should eventually do this December wrap up. So that's what's been going on with us. I don't know what that's going to mean for my end of year videos. I still want to do them, but I just don't know. It'll just depend on it. Like if my energy tanks again, I just want to be able to like listen to my body and what it needs. And so it could be like into February by the time I finish all those videos. I know almost everybody else is done with their end of year videos, so you might not be interested in seeing them, but I still want to do them because I think it's kind of fun to see what I loved from last year and stuff like that. I just might not do as many as I was planning, and they might be end of January before they come up. But let's at least like try to get through these books that I read at the end of December. And I'm going to do these in order from, I have one that I didn't rate, so I'll start with that, and then I'm going to go from like my lowest rated to my highest rated. So first, the one book that I read and did not rate was Lore Olympus by Rachel Smythe. And this is a graphic novel, comic. It was originally a webtoon, but then she has now published it into book form. So this is only like I don't know how many episodes, like, because it's split up in episodes for the webtoon. I think this was the first like 25 or something like that, 27 episodes. And I didn't rate it because I just didn't think that this is the medium that I should have been reading it in. I got about halfway through the book and I was like, I don't like the way it's formatted on the page. Like it was kind of hard to read because it's like several slides are on a page. And so I ended up pulling up the webtoon and actually like reading it on my iPad. And I like that much better because that's how she designed it originally. And so it was, you know, bigger, easier to see each of the, like, are they called slides? Like each of the pictures and graphics, and I was just able to get into it more. I also don't like where it ended the story of this first one, so I just didn't want to rate the whole series based on this like published version, because you know that's not how she originally did it. So I am going to continue to read the webtoon. I'm just going to do it on my iPad, and so I've made it farther than this first book ended, but I haven't finished the whole webtoon. But I'm definitely enjoying it better reading it online as opposed to in the book form. So I don't know that I would recommend it. I guess if you don't have a way to do it online, that you can get the book, but I just don't think that it was the best way of absorbing that information. But I don't even know if I said what this is about. This is a Hades and Persephone retelling, and I mean it was fun. You know, it's very kind of more modernized and things like that. So I've enjoyed it so far, but I'm kind of holding out judgment until I finish the webtoon. And then my lowest rated book, which is the only one I don't have physically, is Ordeal by Innocence by Agatha Christie. And this is a standalone Agatha Christie, so it's not like Poirot or anything like that. And I picked it up because I just wanted kind of like a fun audiobook to listen to quickly. It was kind of approaching Christmas, and I was like, okay, I don't want to start like a long audiobook. I just want something I can kind of really listen to quickly before the end of December. And yeah, I hated this book. So let me just first say what the synopsis is and then go into the reasons I hated it. So this was we start following this man who he shows up at this family's house, and he's like, I want to talk to you about your son who died in prison. And he kind of goes this whole backstory, and this is all the very beginning. He goes into this whole backstory of, I can't remember the family's name, but this family's son was in prison for killing the mother, and he died in prison of like pneumonia or something like that. And he had said in his trial that he was innocent and that he had this alibi that he had been hitching a ride with this man. And so like, you know, the court had put out publications saying, you know, if you gave this man a ride, please come, you know, and speak at the trial. And nobody showed up, so they just assumed he was lying about his alibi. Well, this man who is coming to the family is the alibi, and there's whole reasons why he didn't come out at the time of the trial. And so he's coming to apologize to the family because he found out that the man had died in prison and that he was innocent, and so this man that was the alibi feels a lot of guilt and wants to tell the family that, by the way, their son didn't kill their mother. But the problem with that is that means somebody else in the family did kill her, because the only people that were there that day were family members and like the help and stuff, like the maid, or I don't know if she's a maid or if she's like the governess, I don't know. The people that worked in the house and the family were the only people around. And so like he's kind of opened this whole can of beans because now they don't know who killed her. Yeah, so that's kind of the premise. And so that sounded interesting, but the problem was that, and not even the things that I really hate about this, but like just even if you take away the things I really hated, if you just look at the plot, I didn't think it was that interesting, because it sounds interesting, but then it's all just like info dumpy. Like him telling basically everything I just said and like him going through his whole explanation, it's just like him sitting down telling them. And I'm like, I am really bored by this, and why would this family just let him sit down and tell this whole long story without like being like, get to the point, man, why are you here talking about our son? And yeah, he just is telling it all, and then like the way that the mystery kind of unfolds is not really that interesting. I thought that the conclusion was very anticlimactic, and I didn't like the way it ended in terms of the mystery. So if it had just been that, it might have gotten a 3-star, but the reason I gave it 2 stars was because I just really couldn't handle all the like racist and ableist and like anti-adoption stuff that was happening through this entire thing. It just like kept making me so angry. And I've seen some of those things pop up in Agatha Christie's work before, but sometimes it's not overwhelming. So I'm like, okay, it's a sign of the times. Yes, she wrote these a long time ago, so I can maybe like skip over a little bit. But this one, it just kept barraging me. It just like, because all of the children in this family were adopted. And so like one of them is biracial, and just all the comments that people were making about this woman, it's like they just couldn't say anything not offensive about her. Like it was just really bothering me. And then there's also a man, I don't remember if he had polio or something. He was in a wheelchair. He was a paraplegic, and the stuff they were saying about him and like, you know, like the ableist comments and stuff was just horrible. And then because they were all adopted, everybody, and you know, like they thought that the son had killed his mother, and they're like, well, it's not like he was really her son. And just the comments, like everybody kept making comments about how these kids aren't really their children. They couldn't really love these children like real children. And you know, I'm an adoptive mother, so it was like really bothering me. And I don't want to like actually be on the side of the adoptive parents, because the way they adopted these kids was not good. Like, it's not like they went through proper channels. They basically just found kids that they didn't think their parents were taking care of them, and like just were like, okay, now you're our kids. So I don't condone the way they adopted these kids, but like just the way everybody talked about adoption in this book was really bad. So yeah, it was just all this negativity comments were just too much for me. It made me really mad. And then on top of that, the arc of the story wasn't great. So I would not suggest this one. That's Ordeal by Innocence. Yeah, I would not suggest this Agatha Christie as something you should read. It wasn't good. And then my 3-star book, because the rest of these are all 4 and 5, the other one I didn't love was The Red Pyramid by Riordan. This is the first in the Kane Chronicles, and I was excited to read this because this is all about Egyptian mythology, and we had studied ancient Egypt, you know, back in like October, November. So I was really excited because I knew about all of the goddesses and all the stuff that was talked about in this, so I thought I would really enjoy it. It's about 2 siblings that they have been living separately. Like, their mother died when they were young, and the dad has had the boy and has been traveling around doing his Egyptologist stuff, and then the girl has been living with their grandparents, and they only see each other like once or twice a year, and that's like the custody agreement, that the dad only gets to see his daughter a couple times a year. So the kids haven't grown up together, but then something happens that at this recent visit that throws the 2 kids together, and they have to save their dad. Seems like a great premise. Like I said, a lot of Egyptian mythology and all that stuff, but I was just so bored throughout this whole book. So I gave it 3 stars. I could not connect to the main characters. This goes back and forth. Like, one chapter will be from Sadie and one will be from Carter. Is that his name? And half the time I couldn't remember who was who. Like, their voices were too similar, which is weird because she's grown up in Europe and like England, and he hasn't. So like you would think their voices would be a little different. But yeah, they sounded exactly the same, so I could never keep track of who was talking. I didn't think like the obstacles were very interesting. Like, they were solved so quickly, and I know that happens a lot in like middle grade quest kind of stories, that you know, that you hit an obstacle and then they solve it, but it wasn't like in an interesting way. Like, it was just boring. Like, at least like when you read Percy Jackson, at least like you're invested in what's happening and interested in it, but this one I was just bored the whole time. So I'm not going to continue the series. I might read the graphic novels just to find out what happens, because they did do a graphic novel version of all these, and I thought, well, if I really want to know what happens, I could read the graphic novels, because at least I don't have to slog through. Like, this was like 500 pages. There's no way I'm reading 2 more books that are 500 pages long, but I might like look through the graphic novel and find out what happens. But yeah, would not suggest this as one of Rick Riordan's finest work. I just found it very boring. All right, and then I have a few 4-star books. First, I have a Spindle, Splintered by Alix E. Harrow, and this one I'm going to be talking more about when I do my like Sleeping Beauty retelling video, but I'll just go through basically the synopsis now and like whether I liked it or not. Obviously, I gave it 4 stars, so I liked it. So this is a kind of retelling of Sleeping Beauty, but it's very self-aware, so it's like in the story, it's telling you it's going to be about Sleeping Beauty. Like, it's not just you're going into like a modern retelling. Like, she starts from the very beginning, our main character talking about Sleeping Beauty and all the different versions and which one she likes and why she's obsessed with it. So we're following this girl, which what's her name? Zinnia, and she has a what's it called? A chronic illness. I couldn't think of the word. So she has a chronic illness that she was born with that has a short life expectancy. So she's known her whole life that she's not going to live fully into adulthood. And so that has been kind of like the curse, you know, like Sleeping Beauty. So she's always felt kind of a kindred with the fairy tale of Sleeping Beauty because that's another cursed girl, like somebody who at birth was given a curse. And so her kind of whole life has kind of been obsessed with Sleeping Beauty. And then all of a sudden she's sucked into this like Sleeping Beauty world. And I don't want to tell any more than that because it's really short. It's a novella. But like, just so you know, if you don't like pulp culture references or like when a retelling is very self-aware and like telling you all the like modern parts, ways in which the fairy tale is, old and telling you how it can be modernized. If you don't like it like that, then you probably won't like this. I did not like it at first, but I liked the way that she twisted around a lot of the backstory about like the villains and even the princess, like the character that is like the Sleeping Beauty character. I enjoyed all of those kind of ways she twisted it, but I did not like it at first how like self-aware it was. So that's just something to know if you don't like your retellings to be so like aware that they're retellings. But I did think it was interesting the way it went and kind of like the feminist take on this. This is also not like a love story like a lot of fairy tales. Like that's not the point of it. It's more like the, self-discovery girl power kind of retelling. And one thing I want to say about this that I just thought was really interesting is that at the beginning, she said it's taking place in Ohio. I live in Ohio. She starts talking more and more about like where in Ohio. And I'm like, oh, so I think it's like central Ohio, kind of where I am. And then she goes into like exact roads. Like she's talking about a location and like the name of the location and the roads. And then she gets to the town and I'm like, this actually takes place 20 minutes from my house, like in a real town. And I've never read a book that took place so close to where I live. And I just thought that was really interesting because it's like a real place and like she names it and like talks about roads that I've been on and stuff like that. So I just thought it was interesting. I mean, like if you live in someplace like New York or Chicago, you've obviously read a lot of books that take place in your hometown. But I live in the middle of nowhere, Ohio, and this takes place in a town just down the road from me. So I just thought that was interesting. Next, we have The Holiday Swap by Maggie Knox, and this is obviously my Christmas book. This is the only Christmas book I read in December, and I just thought it sounded cute. A lot of people were talking about it because it was a book of the month book, and this is some romance about these two sisters who trade places. So one of them is like a cook that works on like a baking show, and she falls and gets a concussion and loses her sense of taste and smell. And because that's so important to cooking and like they're in the middle of this like really important like filming of her show, she asks her twin sister to trade places with her since she can't like really be a judge for a baking competition when she has no taste and smell. And so they switch places and then of course, fall for guys in their sisters' lives. And then it's like, I don't know. This is basically a Hallmark movie in book form. So if you like Hallmark Christmas movies, you'll probably like this, but it's definitely that cheesy, like kind of suspension of disbelief that these women would actually like be able to do this switch as adults and like have the men be okay with it and eventually, because obviously that's what's going to happen. Like we all know they're going to end up together and that everything's going to be happy. Yeah, it's totally Hallmark movie in book form. But I like Hallmark movies at Christmas time. It's like the time of the year where I really just want everything to turn out happy and everybody to be in love. And there's baking in both sides because the other sister is like a hometown baker. Like she works at a bakery, her parents' bakery. So there's lots of baking and sweet guys and cute relationships. So yeah. Next Christmas, if you're in the mood for Hallmark movie in book form, try The Holiday Swap. Next, I have the book that I finished like basically right at the end of the year. So I finished this on like December 31st, like right before the end. But I really wanted to finish this next book in the series. I finished The Heart of Betrayal by Mary E. Pearson. This is number 2 in the Remnant Chronicles. And I had reread the first book in the Remnant Chronicles in 2021 because I was going to continue the series, and then I didn't do it. So then at the end of the year, I'm like, I've got to finish this book so that I can at least, make up for the fact that I read that first book again. And I don't know how much I could say about this book because obviously it's book 2. In the first book, which a lot of people know about, this is a popular series, but in the first book, we have a princess who flees her wedding because she doesn't want to get married to a prince from another country or whatever. And then she's being pursued by both the prince that she's supposed to marry and an assassin. and she meets both these men, and she doesn't know that one of them is a prince and one is there to kill her. Like, so she doesn't know about that, and we spend most of the book not knowing either. We don't find out who they are until towards the end. And there's also a lot of political things happening, because, you know, her marriage was supposed to be a political marriage, and then, you know, a lot of tension happening between these three countries. And so this continues that, in fact, of like all the this is much more political in the first book, because in the first book she's just kind of like coming into her own and learning how to be on her own, and then, like, you know, everything that happens with the assassin and prince. This one is all about the politics between these three countries, so I can't really say anything else. But I didn't love it as much as the first one. I think I just really enjoyed seeing her day-to-day life and seeing her, like, romance, and just, like, I really enjoyed the ending of the first book. It was very explosive. And then this one just, like, was, I don't know, I didn't like that there was still kind of a love triangle, and the politics weren't that interesting because they seemed too stretched out. And then we get about, like, to the, I don't know, 2/3 of the way through the book, and all of a sudden everything's happening, and it was really exciting, and I was really invested. So, like, I would probably give the first, like, 2/3 3 stars, but then the ending was really great, 5 stars. So I just averaged it to 4 stars because I still really like these characters, and it did, like, have a great ending. So I'm excited to read the last one, but I hope the last one doesn't have so much of this, like, love triangle-y, you know, slow politics. I want it to just be, you know, go in and just full force the whole time. But it's like a 600-page book, so probably not. But yeah, I still enjoy this one. 4 stars. Want to finish the series in 2022 so I can finally finish that trilogy. Then my last 4-star book is The Anthropocene Reviewed by John Green. This is a book where it's basically a collection of essays where the Anthropocene is the, like, name for the era that we're in now, you know, like the time when humans have really contributed a lot to and affected the earth. And he is just, like, kind of making a comment on the fact that we as humans like to review everything. You know, like, there's Yelp reviews for everything out there. And so he just kind of goes through different random things and he reviews them, gives them some, you know, a star on the 5-star scale and talks about them. So it can be anything from, like, Halley's Comet to velociraptors to teddy bears to the internet, like any kind of random thing. And this one caught me by surprise because he would start talking about something that would be completely random, and I'm like, oh, well, this is gonna be just kind of like a fun essay. And then all of a sudden he would just, like, hit me with, like, this big emotional discussion, and I'd be crying. Like, I was taking my time reading this over several weeks, because with essays I find, you know, I can just read like a few at a time and then I feel like I need to put it down. And I was listening to this on Christmas Day, and I was just like, I'm gonna listen to a couple essays just while we're having some downtime while my husband was cooking or whatever. And I just started bawling, and I was like, okay, I need to put this book down. I am, like, just crying like crazy, and it's Christmas, and yeah. And it was just a lot every once in a while. I cried at least, like, 5 times reading this book, and I'm not a big crier. I don't know what it was. He just had this way of talking about, like, the human experience that hit me so hard. He also, like, talks a lot about his anxiety and depression, and this is definitely a pandemic book. Like, a lot of these had moments in there where he was talking about what it was like, the loneliness of the pandemic, and, you know, separation from family and friends and things like that. So if you are not ready to be, like, reading a book that's kind of taking place in the pandemic, then you probably don't want to read this. But yeah, I learned a lot from a lot of these essays. Like, I learned a lot about grass. Like, he was talking, we had a whole one about grass and about how much Americans spend on the care of grass, which I've always thought was pretty ridiculous. But, like, to hear it lay out, like, how much chemicals and money we spend on grass and time and management was a lot. But, like, yeah, so I learned a lot about some of these essays. I felt emotionally invested in a lot of these. So I really enjoyed this book and would recommend it. Definitely an audiobook. He narrates it, and he did it as a podcast as well, so it kind of feels like you're listening to a podcast. So I would suggest listening to it and just kind of listening at an essay at a time, and be ready with the tissues, because every once in a while, yeah, he just hits you. All right, and now on to my 1 5-star book that I read in the second half of December. And I'm sorry if I sound horrible this video. I can tell that my voice is not holding up great, but yeah, I might wait a while before I film anything else. But we're almost at the end now. And my last one is one I loved, which was Gullstruck Island by Frances Hardinge. I was reading this as a part of the Frances Hardinge read-along that Kara from Wild Book Garden was doing, and Hannah from Len Hermione, that's her blog. And they are just going through all of Frances Hardinge's books in publication order. And I have been kind of following along, but I was like, I'm not sure if Frances Hardinge is for me, because her first published book I haven't finished yet. I've only made it halfway through. And then the next one was Veer Degree Deep, and I did read that one, and I gave it 3 stars. I enjoyed it. I liked the themes. But then this one, I loved this book. So it might just be as she grows, because we're reading them in publication order, as she grows as an author, I'm just like loving it. I really hope this isn't a one-hit wonder for me, that I enjoy the rest of the books that I read by her, because this is probably in my top 5 of 2021. Like, I loved everything about this book. I need to try to figure out how to describe this, because it's so complex and the themes just kind of unfold so well that it's hard to describe it. But let's see if I can think of how to describe it. So basically, Gullstruck Island is this world where there's a lot of volcanoes, and the volcanoes almost kind of are like sentient. Like, they're definitely part of the people who live there, like the native people, indigenous groups. They're part of their culture and their mythology and things like that. And this is also about colonization. So there's a group of people that have come and colonized this island, and it's kind of like about the interaction between the indigenous groups and this colonizer group, which I can't remember what they're called. But we are following this girl, Hathen, who her group of people are called the Lace, and they're one of the indigenous groups. And on this island, amongst the different groups that live there, there are special people called the Lost. And so they can come from any of the indigenous groups, and they are people that have a special ability to kind of like leave their body through their senses, so they can send their sight out to other places, or their hearing and listen to a conversation on the other side of the island or whatever. So they're able to kind of leave their body through this. And usually the Lace do not have the Lost. Like, Lost are not usually among the Lace. But Hathen's sister, what's her name? Aralu, is a Lost. And so Hathen has always kind of been her sister's assistant, because Aralu can't, a lot of times the Lost can't communicate very well because there's so much outside of their body. They don't take time to really learn to communicate with other people. And so Hathen is kind of like the translator between her sister and the rest of the community. And that's kind of the setup. But then it like moves on to like stuff starts to happen to the Lost, and we're trying to solve this mystery of what's going on with the Lost people. And we are following Hathen as she's trying to protect her sister Aralu, as all this stuff, bad stuff, is happening to the other Lost on the island. And the themes in this book were just so good, and the way she like used this made-up world, and I just felt like I knew all of the groups from this world and how they were interacting, and that you really get to know the characters and the people as individuals. And like the way she's using the theme of colonization and also xenophobia and applying that to this world was just so good. And there's a lot of content warnings with this book, because it's technically a middle grade, but it's got some really hard things that are happening. So I don't want to go into it because a lot of it happens later on, so it could be spoilers, but it would be stuff that would be related around xenophobia and how and colonization, and how colonizers treat native people. So just keep that in mind if you're reading it. But it was just so good. And the character of Hathen, one of my favorite characters. Like, at the beginning, I was like, do I like this character? Because, you're just kind of like, she's just kind of the mouthpiece for her sister. And then as she starts to go off on the adventure and stuff starts happening to her people, she just like, is forced into this situation. And the way her character arc goes, I was just like, I love her. I love the decisions she makes, and the way, just things happen throughout the novel to Hathen, and how she handles them and the decisions she makes. against like some really hard forces, and even against like adults, and you know, because she's young. I don't know how old she is, probably 12, and the decisions she has to make that are adult decisions, but she still feels like a 12-year-old because she's still struggling with that, like not feeling mature enough to handle this, but she's in the situation. Yeah, I don't even know how to talk about this book because a lot of it is spoilers, but let me just say, it's amazing. If you like a book about a younger character, but that is definitely more mature and has adult themes and like shows a very strong main character arc, I would highly suggest this. I also, if you love like a made-up world that is rich, where you really see that this author knows like every single one of the groups that lives on this island and really like has it mapped out in her head and has all these cultural things. So if you like all of that complex world building, but that I didn't find it confusing, like I really felt invested in this world and the people and the characters. There's some really fun characters. There's some characters you hate. There's like villains that you're like, okay, I can see the reasons why this villain is the way they are. Like, so there's complexity to the characters. They're not just all good, all bad. Yeah, I just thought this was amazing. So if you're going to start with Frances Hardinge, maybe start with this one, because like I said, I almost gave up on her because I wasn't loving the other things. But this one, just absolutely loved. Top of the year. And that's it for the books that I read in the second half of December. My throat made it the whole way. Sorry if it sounded really bad, like if I sound really sick. I am still sick. But you know, after 2 weeks, I just feel like I need to move on a little bit with life. Like I can't like leave the house yet because my kids are still sick, so we can't like leave quarantine. But at least I can like interact with the outside world by filming. I hope that you are staying well, and I'll see you next time. Bye.